So this is part 2 in my consciousness series, so explaining the benefits I've experienced from it and how it works. And so we said that there's a separation between consciousness and the ego, the reactive ego and the observing consciousness. So once we've made the distinction, that's the first step. We gain perspective on what we're doing, what the ego is doing. So now I can't really identify completely with my ego like most people do. They use self-reflection just as much as they have to navigate the social environment. But now, through practice of observation, I'm strengthening that aspect, that conscious aspect. And I no longer can identify. It's physically impossible for me. Physically, when I say physically, I mean neurally, I mean physiologically impossible for me to only identify with the ego, reactive ego, because I've restructured my brain and I've become conscious that the way I'm acting in the world, I'm moving in the world, is not me. My emotions, in other words, my experiences I have that cause these emotions and the endless excessive thinking. Whereas once before I thought that was all there was, my thoughts. I thought that was me, my thinking mind. Now I realize, no, it's not. There's something else. There's something deeper. When I say deeper because it's encompassing. In order to see and have perspective on something, in order to be able to see it from different angles, you have to encompass it, be able to circle it in entirety. So we see and we know that the thoughts take place within consciousness. In other words, you can't have any thoughts without being conscious of them. They wouldn't exist. You wouldn't know of it. In other words, you can't know of anything without being conscious. So then, if that's true, it's a very simple, self-evident fact. What can you know if you're not conscious? So, but we're becoming more conscious. So if that's true, then all these thoughts must take place within consciousness. And not only within consciousness, but because of consciousness. Because if there's no consciousness, there's no thinking. So look at that. They take place within consciousness and by consciousness. They're enabled by consciousness, being conscious. They're caused by consciousness and take place within it, but they're not conscious. They're not consciousness. They're a part of consciousness. So when we say a part of consciousness, we can say consciousness is a self, and thoughts and emotions, the reactive ego, the egoic self, is a part of the self, but is encompassed by consciousness. Okay, so that's it. So that's the whole purpose of the observing practice, observing thoughts, emotions. I'm aware of that, because it helps us to strengthen our real self, which is consciousness, our whole self. Our whole self. Our whole self can be everything we're conscious of. Now you may say that things we're not conscious of that are us too. And that's the heart, the way the body digests food, the way the blood moves through our veins, the way the synapses are firing in our head. I mean, I don't have to do those things. I don't have to be aware of them. So that's us too. But we're talking about knowing the human mind. If I asked you, are you aware? Are you conscious? Of course you have to say yes. That's an experience for you. It's undeniable. No one can deny consciousness. The scientists, they're trying to understand it, and I watched them yesterday. It's so funny. This guy's a Nobel laureate, and he had no clue. He was saying, how do we know consciousness exists? It's just our intuition. It's our intuition that tells us consciousness. It's not. We can't really prove it by any other means. And I'm like, one of those people should ask it, are you conscious right now? Yes, well, then what more proof do you need? Consciousness doesn't need a proof of anything, and actually can't be observed by anything because it is the observer. There's nothing greater than consciousness. There's nothing that conscious sits within that can be observed by anything else, because it is the act of knowing all. There's nothing behind it, in other words. Everything takes place within it and because of it. So what is there that's greater that can know consciousness? So it's sort of like a pure experience, this consciousness. So then what happens in this beautiful practice is that we identify less with the egoic self, the responsive self. Now, most people who are untrained and don't have this practice, they live by the ego. They don't really truly see themselves. They see themselves when they have to, like I said, to navigate the social situation, when exigencies arise where they have to self-reflect, but they're not practicing it, so they're not really good at it. And what they see when they self-reflect, what they do is generally justify their behavior, or rationalize behavior, or project their thought, cause, or blame, never really looking at the cause of their disturbance as me, because they're untrained in it. It's sort of like the flashlight can shine on everything else, but you try to say, well, shine the beam on the light, on the bulb itself. It can't be done. So this is the difference between enlightenment or consciousness and ignorance, is that we don't truly see the self in its true nature. We're just living by the ego and moving from one goal to the next, or one desire to the next, or one project to the next. It's big business as usual. How to feed this endless need, and it's a default nature, our default nature, unless we have a practice, and obsessive thinking, because that part of ourselves, that limited self, the egoic self, is always restless. It always wants some stimulation. It doesn't like to be alone with itself. It doesn't like quiet. It's afraid of quiet. It's afraid of stillness. It always wants to be entertained and stimulated. And when things get too quiet, it's scary. It's scary. Because that stillness reminds us that we're mortal. And we don't want to look too deep at those things. We're worried if there's still something bad will come. Quite some unwanted thoughts or emotions will come, arise within us. Restlessness, and then the anxiety and fear. What's it all about? Let me go do something. I don't want to go there. I don't want to look into that. So the ego is always looking for some play, something to do. So that's the second part. This video is about to run out of time on the phone. So just remember that making that distinction, really the true nature, when we start that practice, that we identify then more with consciousness and less with the ego. And the egoic self, reactive ego, is diminished, and the thinking, along with that, the thinking and the feeling, they still come and go, but the recovery time, of consciousness, the recovery time from perturbations or excitations or emotions or excessive thinking, it's noticed right away, and then you recover from it right away, and you come back to center, back to self. And that's what we want. Until eventually, the part that the ego plays is very small. And I'll continue in the next video.